So once you pulled everything off, like I said earlier, you may have to go back in and reshade some things. You want that grid completely gone. Anytime you erase, try to get in the habit of like brushing off your eraser bits with a brush. That way we don't have direct contact with our hands and all that stuff. So your vine charcoal is this really thin, willowy stuff. It's a good idea to get familiar with it, like maybe down in the margins kind of thing. So we are, in order to get good continuous tones, going to use things like cotton balls, little brushes, whatever we need to get that going. And yes, it is erasable. So we want to do everything first with the vine charcoal. So what I'm going to do is evaluate kind of like my medium tones and my big breaks in value. So like one area that I mapped out was this big break in value here. So it seems logical that I might start there. I'm going to be really picky about things like this is a little lighter here than here. Like I would say I probably have a number 7 or 8 value in here, whereas this is more like a 6, right? Laying this on the side, sometimes you can get like a lot more value in there. When you have smooth transitions, it's a good idea to do that so that then you can begin to really get a nice soft transition there. You will get line work if you're not careful. Especially when you're trying to do like a nice soft transition, you wouldn't want to go with a heavy line on there. So if you are more of a hatcher or cross hatcher, which I kind of am, I focus on just making like a really continuous tone. Just like we did when we drug the pencil across the page, right? When we did our hand drawing. So I'm kind of gonna start up in here. You're probably gonna notice as you're working that your charcoal is gonna start drifting downward. Some people like to use a table and draw with the drawing down on the table horizontally so that doesn't happen as much. So again, your temptation to smudge this with your hands is going to be pretty great, but don't. Use implements, as it were. And so again, I'm not defining a break in value there. I'm just going to make it smooth as such with my implements. And I'm not drawing a contour because I don't want that. I want the contour to be represented by a break in value, right? I want like a number 10 out here, maybe a number 8 or 9 here, 6 is here, maybe like a 4 out here. So first I lay it down, and then I go in and I start to fill in the areas that are a little bit more textured. So think of it like a painting because we are blocking in value, right? So I evaluate, you know, am I dark enough? Not quite yet. Some people also like to grind some of this onto a piece of sandpaper and literally dip their brush into it. That's another great way to work. So if you're a more direct person or indirect person, you'll find techniques that do work for you. So I'm gonna go in here and just try to hit some of these spots that are a little bit, I feel like should go a little darker, just to kind of fill in to some degree. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just block everything in that I feel like should be a medium tone. So kind of looking at that, I think I'd like that to be darker here. And you'll see it diffuses quite a bit. So sometimes you'll shade in a spot and you'll have to shade a little bit more because I see it a bit darker out on this edge. So I'm just gonna continue sort of using a directional shading approach with that. So I'm paying very close attention to where I see breaks and values a little lighter in the middle. I'm gonna try to get that further down so I can start to define where it breaks into my lighter part of my forehead. I kind of like the cotton ball just because it seems to diminish the texture of the paper a little better. So we do want to get that in there. That's why we're using the textured side. So probably one of the bigger challenges working with charcoal is to get it nice and smooth when you need it to be smooth. But through repeated applications, you'll get there. I think I'm going to move down and kind of get some of this going on. So I'm going to do a more indirect approach here. So this is why it was important to get your significant breaks and values mapped so that you can kind of follow that. But then we have to dominate your pencil. So like if you went heavy with your pencil, you may end up with a real problem there. I see this plane happening here that I really want to define, so I think I'm going to jump in and I'm going to do a little bit more hatching just to get more aggressive vine charcoal on there. Again, I like to work from the top down just because I don't want to smudge it with my hand as I'm working. So I'm kind of seeing this right in here. So I want to leave some of those areas lighter. I'll probably have to go back and do some erasing to model that. A lot of times when I begin this vine charcoal process, I start to get worried because, you know, it looks very dark right now. But then as I blend it, I'm going to be able to get the values that I want out of that. And a lot of times I'll even take my drawing straight over and compare it with the values that I've created and see if I'm there or closer. So it's always easier to go back and add more value. Harder to take it away. But again, we want to get everything shaded out in vine first, get everything to about the 6-7 stage. Then we move into the compressed, which pushes us even further. So even though you're seeing black areas and you think, oh, I should leave that alone until I get to the compressed, go ahead and block those in. So I see this little, you know, that carved away side of the head, which is a really good illustration of that because there's a break in value there. I think I'm gonna go ahead and drop that in. And I used some shading out here to help me with that. So in order for me to go a little quicker with that, I'm gonna turn my vine on its side. Because I know this area should be really quite dark. So we always do the face first and the head and everything. When we're happy with the modeling of that, then we begin with the atmosphere. And what's gonna happen there is that you may think, okay, this looks like pretty much black over here. But once you drop some compressed behind it, you'll start to see really how not dark it is. Like somewhere in the darker part of the spectrum, but certainly not black. So even though it may not be perfectly smooth in here, I can always go in there and continue to add more vine. Like, you know, I would add some in here, maybe a little bit more here, just to kind of smooth that out. And the more that you push this into the textured paper, of course, the harder time you're gonna have later when it comes to pulling out highlights. So I'm gonna kind of start moving over here now and get some light stuff. And I kind of push dramatic. I don't know, it's just like how I am. I draw a little bit dark. So it doesn't bother me to go dark. It may bother some of you when you first start with this. You know, you might feel like, oh, it's too much. But this project's all about value control. See this little area happening here. Looks like I didn't map that out, but that's gonna work okay for me. So I'm just gonna draw that line in there, bring it across. And I can model that later with the tortillon. Kind of start to get some of the textures happening out in here. Most of the texture work is gonna be in areas where the darkness, like the darker part of the value scale starts to give way to the lighter part of the value scale. That's where you start to see the weird wrinkles, folds, highlights and stuff. So I have a lot of weird intricate stuff in here. And I will probably use my tortillon more for that, you know, to actually draw those textures in. Like I'll go in and probably just create some small line work that I can make darker later. And feel free to use the tortillons at this point to get smooth transitions, to make clean contours, things like that. But I always start with the big areas first, blocking those in. And it's really important when you're working on something of the scale to get back from your work often. Like, evaluate what you've done and go, okay, well, where do I need to go darker? It looks like you need to probably bring a more rectilinear line across here. And I should probably push that quite a bit. So just go piece by piece, you know, don't worry about the whole thing, because we'll get there eventually. Again, if you've never worked with charcoal, mess around in the margins, trying different things. That's gonna help you a lot when it comes to application on the real deal. So today, I want you all to have your grids erased. And I know we're getting close to the end of class. That way next week, so if you need to do it over the weekend, whatever, that way next week, we can begin the charcoal application. And I'll do a little bit of progressive demonstration each day as I progress with my drawing as well. Okay, I feel like that area is pretty well blocked in. So then at this point, I would probably start moving into the shadows in here, around here on this side of the face. I'm not gonna worry about any of the detail at this point. Once I got stuff blocked in and I have all of my values looking like, you know, in the medium to light range, then I'm gonna start worrying about articulation. So it's important to get really familiar with your reference photo. A lot of people think that there's gonna be a lot of white in this composition, but when I'm going through here, I'm only seeing white really in the reflections. Even the whites in my eyes have gray in them, right? So don't think, oh, I need to leave a bunch of white on there because it's a lighter area. Be true to the value scale that you see, yeah? Cool, thank you.